honestly. And let me see if we are. Yes. Yes, online. And here we have it, another episode of Eavesdrop. We are back, Gilded Sages, here with my men. I am the Black Anglo-Saxon. We have Inquisitive Q, and we have Quan the Poet in the building, as y'all know. And we are here again. So, for everybody who is following in right now at this immediate moment, housekeeping, can we please like the video, share the video? We don't need the comments yet, but we gonna need them later because I want you to be honest. We want the engagement. We want to have a conversation. And today, if you've seen the actual flyer, we will be talking about ADOS, which stands for the American Descendants of Slavery. So again, like the video, share the video, join the conversation. So before we jump into, our different stances, our different viewpoints in terms of, the ADOS movement, I just wanted to give people a small little black background in terms of what it is we're talking about if you have not heard of ADOS already. So this is led by Yvette Carnell as well as Antonio Moore. Yvette Carnell being or have been a Democratic surrogate working on Capitol Hill. And then you have Antonio Moore, who is a still acting attorney, and then has done some work in terms of docuseries, uh, Freeway Rick Ross talking about the Iran Contra scandal, just to give a background of the people who have formulated this movement in and around reframing what African American is as it relates to America. And so most of us are familiar with the term Black, right? And so the whole stance and idea around ADOS is to, I don't want to say centralize, but it is to aggregate and specify based on lineage and not race, because race is ambiguous, especially when we talk about America right now and the rapid demographic shifts that we have in terms of whether you're continental, African, Latino, so on and so forth. This moniker, though, is two pronged in a way that they have established it as language that they would like to see used legally to provide um, basically a lock in terms of policy when we talk about who gets what and how monies and resources are divvied up. Then on top of that, you had the moniker just existing as itself to deconstruct the construct of race, because race has been problematic since we've been here in the Americas. And so moving forward, their project is centered around that. And again, to get reparations. Their end goal as a political organization, which we'll get into later, is to get reparations, which I support. I know a lot of people have the conversation around how they want reparations. I think those conversations personally can be held privately, instead of attacking one person or another in terms of how they think reparations should be had. Um, and so with that small preface, I would suggest everybody go over to their channels to look at their work. You have Antonio Moore, again, Tone Talks. You have Yvette Carnell, who is leading Breaking Brown. And then if you want to go and look at the policy solutions that they put forth, as I know we have this whole cluster doodle of Ice Cube going on. If you want to look at that and you want to look at the policy that they want to move forward. You have ADOS101.com, which lays out how they would like to see things, and it also has like data and other things that are there to support their standards. And so, without any longer ado, before we move into this, can y'all please like the video and share the video as we move into the conversation about what we will be discussing tonight. And the first thing I wanted to bring up, and going back to the data that they have there to support um, all of the basically the stances that they hold politically in the open, whether it be on their show, they have a conference and whatnot. I think the data is very important just based on the simple fact that us being a group as African Americans, I think that there's an understanding there that we have not been in that space in assessing data, or before we even get to assessing, even using the data to help us navigate certain conversations. So when we have, like, whether it be us going down to the Wilson building to talk about a particular issue, I've sat in many hearings, but what most of the time happens is people use anecdotal or emotional, or try to appeal to an emotional argument. And what I'll say is, I'll say the DC Council, in the way that they've acted or the way that they have legislated, I would say that they don't necessarily respond to or care about anecdotal emotional appeals. Um, and so what I will say is that I think the data helps in bringing it to people in that way. Just bringing and getting people familiar with it is very helpful in terms of helping other people who have been trying to articulate it to people, because people have had these stances prior to, of course, ADOS. But I think it helps in being able to articulate to people who may not necessarily understand or have blind spots in terms of the plight of African Americans, whether they be black, white, or across any racial, ethnic spectrum. I think it helps being able to articulate it from a numerical standpoint, because a lot of people move in that way. And what I wanted to hear from you is that we know, reciting data is not interpreting it, right? Mm-hmm. But can you not just get into the impact of data, but then just go into how you feel about data, its presentation, and where you stand on it as it relates to just data at large and how they weaponize data?
Okay. Before I get into, you say they, who are the they?
I am referring to Antonio Moore, Yvette Antonio specifically, but we can use ADOS at large, is because they disseminate, and again, they ask people to carry out that in that particular way and manner.
Got you. So using Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore as the leadership of ADOS, you've gotten me hip, and we've been having these conversations about ADOS for a couple of years now. And to see them mature to the level in which they're becoming incorporated, not necessarily incorporated, but a legal institution is interesting. And the data that they put forth is important because, again, I'm a historical guy. It reminds me of the Philadelphia Negro in W. Du Bois, 1899. Why that's important is that sociological data is always important with Black Americans, because a lot of our music is about what's going on at the time. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we get into understanding that these movements come out of people and the people and their understanding. So the way that Carnell and Antonio Moore use data is to show and frame the argument that they're making. Mm-hmm. For why ADOS is different from Black. And I totally agree with that. I've said many times that term Black is an Orientalist term, as far as Edward Said talks about being Orient doesn't mean that you're necessarily of a certain type of race, meaning that an Orient is not a Japanese person as well as an Egyptian or a Palestinian. meaning that the Western imagination with the race projects onto people what they are. We don't have a say in that. But when we say ADOS, we have a say in the timeline. We come from a certain heritage. We come from a certain legal background, a certain economic system. And so when you specify in that way, I can get along with it because it allows me to understand in the grand history of Black liberation where they're coming from. So when they use data and how they use data is to gather people under a cause and under a principle and say, we're not doing this to further our personal interests. We're doing this to further the interests of this group that we belong to personally. Basically saying, my cousin and them, we got this problem because y'all did this to us. Now, with that though, when we look at ADOS followers, and this is what the challenge I see, is that we have to get to a point where we understand that data is interdisciplinary. It's multiple disciplines. You know, I had to say that slowly because I stumbled. It's interdisciplinary.
Go ahead, keep going.
But anyway,
we got you.
That's when we had the multiple professions coming in. That's when you need a cultural anthropologist to talk about hip hop, along with a criminologist to talk about how hip hop is actually talking about how people are getting basketball charges for cocaine issues. Until we get to a level where people understand data, the impact that they're putting forth for the data, they won't understand why they need to be urgent. And that's one of the biggest problems I'm saying amongst the Black American populace. I would say the Black diaspora is that a lot of people hold on to hope, and they allow that hope to dull that sense of urgency. It's like you're gonna have to have that hope that your urgency is gonna get your ass.
You know, I hate hope.
I'm different because of my existentialist, but the part of it I'm getting down to is that people need to. My people, I am specifying ADOS need to understand how important the data that Yvette Antonio Moore are putting forth, and more importantly, how risky putting forth such data is. Because a lot of the problems I see amongst the Black liberation movement is that everyone thinks that they're Malcolm X, everyone thinks they're Martin Luther King, but very few people are willing to put in the work to be Malcolm X and Martin Luther King.
And speaking to your point about Black Americans understanding, African Americans understanding how important it is, the data that they are using and how risky it is in not only using that data, but articulating it, because I think what they do I think especially Yvette Carnell, because I don't necessarily, of course she doesn't get her flowers because of her stances, but I'll say I think she's prolific in the way that she understands the numbers, but how she can contextualize and conceptualize and also be that storyteller at the same time to bring people into the space. Because as we know, you dabble and live in academia, right? You live in that space, right? But what happens is it's hard for people to really come into that space. One, because a lot of academics have a certain type of cachet where they rub people the wrong way, but then also because it's such a large amount and vast information, and because you all put in hours on hours on hours and on hours of consuming information. So when you're talking about building a movement with people who may not necessarily be in that particular industry, I think she does an amazing job at pinpointing the data, using it. And this is why I think her and Antonio Moore make a great team, because he usually brings in the data and she kind of takes it, articulates it, and creates a whole narrative around it that activates people. Because to your point, a lot of people don't have the urgency. And what I'll say is, like, people who classify as ADOS, and I think a lot of the times is misconstrued in terms of people thinking that, because African Americans experience it all of the time. But I think ADOS gets it that much more because they are a political movement in terms of being that angry Black man or angry Black woman who's seen as divisive, when in actuality, there's just that sense of urgency. and trying to get not only ADOS to understand, but our other POC brethren to understand what they're coming into as it relates to America and its politics and its legal, as you referred to earlier. And I think that was super, super important to touch on. And you also mentioned about, anthropologists and being able to do, I think that's just something else that I think that has been good, because even, William Dirty, he is the economist that also, has room in that space in terms of him being an expert. And I think they do a really good job at, because even Tone Talks, Antonio Moore has brought in experts on his show when he was with Dash Radio, to specifically talk about certain things where I see a level of humility that I have respected. And the reason that I even talked about it to you or hit Quan or you as well is because I saw a level of objectivity there, and a level of integrity in terms of like, because people will take something, run with it, and act like they know. And I've seen countless times where it's like, you know what, I don't speak on that. We'll get somebody to have a show on that and bring them in. And we'll had a conversation there. So they brung in a lot of people. I can't remember their names, but because I wanted to say Matt Brunig, but Matt Brunig they actually just used. But it was another white guy. Yeah, his data. But it was another guy who they brought in across the board, across the racial spectrum in terms of having a conversation and people who are willing to have that conversation. And I think what happens with it is that specificity, before we turn tables in terms of that specificity actually helps. Because next up, again, if you're watching this video right now, can you share the video, comment? We in the groove of things. We want to hear your opinions. Tell us, if you are aware of ADOS, how did you come into ADOS? What do you think about ADOS? Because again, even in being in DC Young Democrats, I have people who don't necessarily agree with it. They think Antonio Moore is vile, but I stand. I'm going to bring it to people. And it's like, look, you got to see this point, this point, this point, that point. And I understand that it may come off a particular way, but you have to, this is where the reciprocity comes in terms of, we listen to y'all. We are now asking you all to listen to us, and understand the emotional side of where we're coming from, not only the intellectual side. Because I think a lot of the times we as Black ADOS, African American people, don't have enough space to be emotional. But with that being said, we talked about the importance of expertise. And I want to hear your opinion on, expertise not being a combination of formal education, but rather experience. And the former is a credential and, being a ladder of real life. I want to hear how you particularly frame that, because it's something that I believe I understand in what you're saying, but I would love for you to articulate that for not only myself, but for people.
What I mean by that is that it's funny you say academic spaces, I'll say educated centered spaces. Mm-hmm. But when you get in educated centered spaces, especially education, is focused on the community. And what you have to get people who are highly credentialed to understand is that just because you have a credential that focuses on an element of poverty doesn't mean you understand poverty. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that is that if you tell someone who is let's say typically it's a white middle class woman who grew up that's a relatively affluent, and she felt like she wanted to be a social worker. Mm-hmm. So she goes to the best schools, she gets the best degrees in social work, and so now she's the head of a program, and she has to tell this 14 or 15-year-old Black American woman, ADOS girl, how to take care of her why she's failing in class and how she should handle her stress. And what I mean by that is that if you are not used to chronic stress, street knowledge, then you don't have the real life experience to say how you can help one person go from one stage in life to the next. Experience means process. Credential means that I learned from someone who went through a process, wrote something down, and then they understood that. And what I'm getting down to and saying is that there's a certain level of maturity you have to have with a body of knowledge to be an expert. You cannot come out of college and be an expert in anything because you have to practice that knowledge. So when it's been said to me, well, Quenton, you have street knowledge and institutional knowledge. Well, street knowledge, going back to the whole thing about emotions, is street knowledge is you got to understand how to infer and deduce and to deal with people emotionally before you get to the institutional knowledge of putting then this is the theory behind what it is that we do. So there's a lot of people who have the institutional knowledge of poverty, but doesn't have the street knowledge or the day-to-day knowledge of living with poverty. So people make up a lot of theories about how things can be done instead of sitting back and saying, well, let me really see how we can solve this problem, not from an advantage point of view, but a disadvantage point of view. So you get a lot of mistrust in this person saying, well, this person could do it if they want me smart enough. And another person saying, I could do it if you only give me more resources. It becomes tit for tat. Because everyone thinks they're expert on their own experience.
This is very true. And this is going back to the point earlier. That's why a lot of people use a lot of anecdotal data, especially when we talk about, when we get into these conversations, whether they be online or offline, I get into them frequently. I've taken it back to online just due to mental health and, having to go through hearing black men are trash all day, every day. I'll say when it comes to expertise and not using anecdotal evidence, I think it's super pivotal because a lot of people get caught up in their own, like you said, experiences. And I try not to do that. I try not to use myself. Like, for example, I always say that when I'm talking about, poverty, I can only use my past self in terms of coming out of that, but I don't use my current self anecdotally in trying to have a conversation with people around, well, if I can do this, you can do this too, because I'm not an expert on how to matriculate.
That's a larger problem that we have with the ADOS or Black American thing is that a lot of people think, well, you should be able to do it because I did it, and because we're Black, we're all the same. It's like, no. What I don't like about the Black moniker, although I really do understand the ADOS, and I'll get more into that when we talk about the institution, is that, to your point, people need to admit that just because we're Black, we're not all the same. Just because we're ADOS, we're not all the same, because we're freaking flapping humans. We have different capabilities. We have different things that we're interested in. So just because you are capable of doing something doesn't necessarily mean that the other person's capable. But there's a lot of people who make money. Hill Hopper, to be in particular, the Letter to a Young Brother, that parental tone of, I did it as a Black man, you should do it as a Black man. It's like, that's bullshit, but it's okay.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that happens in, like you said, African American dialogue.
That's funny. He's like African American.
Because what happens is I try to be careful in marrying the two because there's a certain ideology, especially when you classify yourself as a political organization, that comes along with how you necessarily move. Versus I understand that we are technically all ADOS. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, we are all ADOS.
Yeah.
But in terms of that expertise, I always forfeit my opinions to people who do that type of work, or people who have, like you said, it's not just about you going to school for it, but what do you do after that, and how are you entrenched in that? Have you taken the footwork to go on and actually live in that? Because to your point, when you talk about life experience, it's about living it. It's about being in it. It's about taking the punches left and right, whatever institution you're in or whatever industry you're in, because they all are different. But when it comes down to it, as African Americans, we largely suffer a lot of the same experiences, right? And so, what I would say to
Let me just
go ahead.
For a certain degree. You say we suffer the same experiences in what aspect?
In the aspect of that, we have to usually capitulate, or
Okay, we're subjugated to white ideals.
absolutely.
Okay,
And
I get what you're saying.
that's the more general experience of like, look, we want to call out Daniel Cameron for being a coon and all of that. But we don't want to call out Obama for being a coon. And it's like, look, they both capitulate into the system. They're just doing it
different
in a different way.
I get you.
And because I told you I didn't like the fact that Meg Thee Stallion came out and did that whole thing. It's like, that's a conversation we can have in private. Have a conversation about why Daniel Cameron had to do that with being inside of an institution, because you all are also making an argument, and not to go off topic, Kamala Harris, we can make the same comparison, but she gets a pass and he doesn't.
So for now, I'm hearing a lack of consistency.
We can pick a side and stand on it.
We can table this for the next conversation when we talk about slaves.
Absolutely.
We can table that for that.
But in terms of expertise, though, I appreciate the way that they go about using experts, and I appreciate when you talk about their content as it relates to YouTube, because I've seen glimpses and things that they've done, off of YouTube in terms of just like actual political activity. So in seeing that, it's like, all right, cool, that's another thing. But in terms of also their content as it relates to YouTube, they do a really good job of admitting to self and saying, you know what? Nah, we gonna bring somebody else in because I don't know. And on top, because again, we could easily
game up with me. I'm listening. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, it's a longer discussion about production value. It's a longer discussion about autonomy. It's a longer discussion about organizational structure, as well as authority and what level of authority they want to have over the transatlantic slave trade. Because what institutions are is the bodies of authority. That's all institutions are. They are bodies of authority that focus on an aspect of the community. And I see that they're focusing on ADOS. That's nice. But as we'll get into later on, the apprehensions I have with any institution, especially any institution that tries to utilize that narrative, that includes the NAACP.
And so, with that being said, as we move into the next space, if y'all watching this right now, like the video, share the video, leave your comments, because we'll get into the end of this later, where we just have a general conversation about it and we address topics, and we'll give people an opportunity to call in. But with that being said, you mentioned organization, you mentioned the formalization of the group, which I will say that I am happy to see, as it adds some hierarchy, as it adds some level of measurement in terms of who's doing what. And it, for me, adds a focus, a different level of focus.
And accountability.
Very much so. Very much so. And so with that being said, I like that you have moved into that. We talk about the diversity, in American movements as it relates to African Americans, ADOS, Black Americans. as we move into that, I would like to hear, you know, you talk about or elaborate on what it is you just alluded to in terms of the organization mechanics. And you said you had an issue, particularly with institutions at large.
Yeah.
And I would like for you to go into that as it relates to, for everybody who's watching, ADOS is becoming a C4 organization. Kudos to Yvette Antonio and Antonio Moore
That's a legal hurdle.
for and not only a legal hurdle, for withstanding a lot of the smears that came towards. Because again, we were talking about earlier, Donovan, still the whole bots and all of those type of different things, and still being able to be here with enough people to formalize. So kudos to that. We know politics is dangerous and savagery and just complete tomfoolery at times.
Mhm.
I understand why people don't like politicians. I can get it out 100%. I understand why people don't like politics, but not to hold you up any longer. You can go ahead and, in terms of the C4 the organization and your stance on
Yeah.
institutions at large.
Again, I echo the congratulations to them for formalizing. And what I do like about them formalizing, because I had to think about the light thing, but is that it brings on that level of accountability. It brings on reports that I can read. It also enables me to challenge them on their stances, as well as, okay, I see what you stand against, I see what you stand for, but how do you continue your legacy? And with that said, though, them becoming a C4, which I believe you said is a nonprofit political organization, it really is going to be, what does ADOS do from here? How does ADOS go from, we want our economic justice, we want equity in the Anglo-American capitalistic system, not only because we are Americans, but because we have put in work under chattel slavery, under peonage, so forth, under Jim Crow, black codes, and so forth. We are due our economic justice to help with our public health crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I get that, and I appreciate that. What do you do for the next generation? How do you, what lessons, what bodies of information are ADOS going to cover? Are ADOS going to have legal scholars that's going to help? Because we have a lot of the labor issues, contract issues. We have a lot of real estate issues, especially with low ownership. Are they going to, what services are they going to provide? Any service that specifies for ADOS? Are they going to write for and campaign for certain things to be earmarked in different states for different members of ADOS? So my question really is, for this formalization, is like, kudos, you're formalizing. All institutions formalize. And when you get, all social movements formalize. You have SNCC, you have with, who's the head of SNCC? Quan.
I want to say Stokely.
Stokely Carmichael. You got Stokely Carmichael. Then you have Martin Luther King. Then you have the Nation of Islam. Basically, what I was sent over to you, Randall Kennedy, 2008 sellout. And the reason why I keep talking about sellout is because Randall Kennedy shows that there's a long history of Black Americans with the Black liberation movement coming from different perspectives. We talk about this again in one of our first episodes, The Hood Jargon, is the Negro problem with Booker T. Washington and W. Du Bois.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of Black organizations that start, including the Black Panthers with Fred Hampton and so on. Huey P. Newton. How are they, as a new organization, as a new league, going to formalize and then create a legacy that makes this worth it?
So what I'll say to that is, again, definitely congrats to the C4 designation. From watching their work, what I'll say is that is probably one of their biggest strong points, is that it isn't about them. They have denounced the Messiah leadership format. With that being said, it's all about, in terms of the ADOS chapters that they have, we have one in the DMV. I wish it was compartmentalized down to separate regions because we function differently. But again, starting out, I commend that. I'm always encouraging people to be politically active. They have done things in that way, and they prioritize and champion the actual professional class of Black people. They catch a lot of flack for going, quote unquote, going as celebs or trying to hold celebrities accountable. But I think a lot of that comes from, like, look, we need to free up space to get more voice or more amplification for our professional class, because she's articulated that.
She is who?
Yvette Cornell.
Okay.
We need people who actually do this, live this out every single day, whatever profession you're in, whether you're an everyday politico, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a freaking welder or whatever. We need to come together cohesively to be able to build these institutions outside of politics. Of course, it's a political organization, but again, as a community, despite whatever political ideology may come from it, I need my attorneys, my welders, my businessmen. We all need to come together. And I think a lot of that has happened from what I've seen in terms of everyday people not only gaining their voice, but everyday people being able to offer their expertise in whatever field it is that they've worked in. Like one of the women's, Zena Harris, if I'm saying your name correctly, apologize. Everyday life, invited to the conference to elevate her in terms of the work that you particularly do. Because again, that's not a lane that I am. So I am going to use somebody from the community to give them a platform to speak on it. I think they, again, do a very good job of that. And I think the C4 designation helps them with that tremendously, as it adds a checks and balances, and it helps them in a way where you can counteract the, not only the smears, but people who have bad faith, the bad faith actors that tear you down from the inside.
Because some of them are smears.
Because some of them aren't necessarily.
I'm talking about against the ADOS. We'll get to it.
Yeah,
we'll get to that. But go ahead.
I get what you're saying in terms of you have people who, and this is where social media, I feel like, gets super crazy.
But that's also
you can make a fake. Yeah, you can make a fake account and just go out and say super crazy stuff, or you could just be a person who was sent to say super crazy stuff.
Or you could be actually ADOS, and leadership hasn't gotten to your ass to make you understand that's not what we on, but you're carrying that flag in that direction. And for some of us, that's going like, we get it, but don't make that, don't, and here's where I'll say this for now. A lot of ADOS followers make it hard for ADOS leadership because they don't have the ADOS acumen, ADOS leadership acumen, but they take on that passionate tone.
Yep. And the reason that
and it rubs people the wrong way, you know, it's like, I get you. I'm not white, but understand this, Slim. I will knock you out intellectually.
No, that's I agree with that 100%. As you know,
I'm not going to ADOS leadership. I'm just saying that that's amongst the options.
You are, because again, I understand it from that perspective, because when you're online, you don't know who's who. And I present as an establishment person, and I've even been like, okay, cool. But I get it. But because I'm grounded in Yvette, and I've worked under principals, I've worked in administrations, and you know me, I'm not necessarily going to hold you I'm not necessarily going to hold you super accountable for what I know some person says on the sideline, because I see and watch what you say, because she's explicitly, y'all gotta chill.
I get
y'all gotta chill.
But the problem is that let you finish before we can fall into the free form. I'm sorry.
No, you good. We gonna go back. Go ahead.
That's fine. Because that's an element of leadership, right? An element of leadership is getting your followers to understand what they risk when they speak on your name badly. And what I don't see or haven't seen from the ADOS movement is people banishing people for certain behaviors. And that's what, because a lot of, that's where I get in trouble when you're an elitist. It's like at a certain point, it's not about being an elitist, it's about time. If we keep spending time on people who want attention because they want to act out, they want to be seen, but they don't want to put in the work, you gotta go. You gotta go. You ADOS, you come from us, you family, but you know how we got that uncle that keeps cutting up. Okay, you gotta go. You're not invited to the party. And that's what ADOS needs.
That's real life.
Well, that's real life. I want ADOS, and what I want to see from ADOS is like
it's chopped.
Because you saw the video going on with Yvette Antonio giving Do What Just Do Is, talks about how they're not going to stand for that. Talked about why she decided to formalize, because she saw it herself. When she spoke on it, this need to be formalized. And that goes back down to, and I'm moving away from Yvette Antonio and Antonio Moore when I say this, because what they're facing is just a larger problem amongst Black Americans. Everybody thinks that they're the next leader, because what they want to do is pretend to be the next leader, confuse white America, and act like they actually know something. Yeah, I'm woke, I understand, I get it, I'm a Black scholar, so they can get a check. And that's what I'm getting to with it. It's like, we got to get to a point where we're willing to say, like, this nigga's stupid. You don't know what the hell he's talking about. In front of white people, going like, if you listen to him, I judge you.
Yeah.
If you listen to Tory Lanez about Black issues, I judge you. If you listen to LeBron James about Black issues, I judge you. LeBron James don't know a damn thing about Black issues at the level in which ADOS with Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore is talking about. Same thing with Ta-Nehisi Coates. We have to get to a level where we have to start calling people out like, yeah, you are nice, but we're not telling you just dribble a ball. We also saying because you dribble a ball very well and because you can sell product, doesn't mean you can speak policy. You're not Barack. He can dribble the ball and shoot, but he also can do politics. You don't like him as a politician, but he's a shrewd politician at that. He's really good.
I would agree.
That's why I hate him.
I don't think I have any disagreements with that. In terms of, again, I've worked for people who I don't always completely agree with, but that is the nature of politics in terms of protecting your principles.
That's institutional life.
I agree. Even outside of politics, is protecting your principle, protecting the ideology.
It's a family fight.
And what I will say to that is, I think, like you said, that in the leadership understanding where they're at, I am excited to see where they go for in terms of formalizing, moving people in that way, just based on the simple fact that I think that they get it. And they're dealing with a population who has not really dealt with politics, or has not really dealt with, or hasn't had the interest really, because unfortunately, as many followers as they have, they should have more, because we're over here doing what we do, right? And so we should have more, because, and the reason I say that is because right now you have a whole bunch of people coming out and attacking Ice Cube, right?
Mm-hmm.
Attacking him for wanting to be in a political space.
Mm-hmm.
But those same people who are attacking Ice Cube are the same people who feed entertainment and celeb culture to the point where they have the amplification to be able to do and leverage the voices in that manner.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is like, well, you also don't speak or care about politics, because that's the reason why he has the room and space to do what he's doing.
Okay, so would you say this? right? I totally agree with everything you're saying. Do you think, because right now it's with the working class, would ADOS move like Black capital has moved with a select group? Because it seems like with Black Americans, as part of this is when we on camera, but it's like the focus.
And when you say a select group, you mean just in terms of
just numbers, just a select group that's effective.
I think
like it's going to be a select group that's just effective.
I think that's institutional. I think that's political, and I think that's the part that they get because it has to be a select group. We always talk about you can't bring everybody. You always tell me you can't bring everybody.
You can't.
And so I think that they get that, and she articulates that explicitly, and like, nah, if y'all don't get it, I have to keep going because this isn't just about you. This isn't just about one individual. So yes, I am going to leave people. And for me, I usually am the perspective of like, I'm usually agreeing, but I'm also like,
you have a caveat?
No, not even a caveat. I thank you for saying that because it allows me to see that you're moving in a particular way, but you understand it because you've articulated like, look, it's no hard feelings. Even when it comes down to the critiques, it's no hard feelings. It's just is what it is. I have to move in a way where I am helping not only myself, because even when you talk about, people talk about selling out, it's like, look, when you talk about politics and you talk about DNC, I honestly believe that if they were going to sell out, they would have sold out at this point, just because I understand how Democrats would like to not have that level of objectivity, especially with the articles and the case study that they put behind their work. I'm sure they've gotten calls that like, look, we give you a strategist or, some type of analyst position or something.
Yeah, bring you in and silence you.
Yeah.
Shelf you. Yeah.
Right? And
keep you there for a couple of years.
I'm sure that has happened. And I think going back to your point earlier, I think they've moved outside of that space because they have gone to such an extent that they're irredeemable for the party politics. In terms of
party, mean establishment politics?
Yeah, because what happens is people want to align them with Democrat and Republican, with where it benefits them.
I'll say what I gotta say about that.
And it's like they've been objective in such a way where no, they're just literally standing on what it is they stand on, because this isn't a situation where you can just take back 3-4 years of videos and content on people. And so it's like, nah, I think this is just what I feel in terms of like, I think they're more genuine in that sense, in the fact that we, again, both understand that shit changes. But right now, where it stands, I think that there are the more genuine people. And going back to the sellout point, I think this is where, like we were talking about earlier, people have to protect the leaders. People have to come out for the leaders. Because what is a sellout if there is no standards? If there is no consensus? What am I selling out of? But everybody just wanting to do for themselves and their own benefit.
And yes.
Because people would be mad at them for doing such, but if the larger masses of African American people were to get upset at them for quote unquote selling out or taking a backseat, which I don't think they would necessarily do, but if they did, I don't think we have that right at this point. Because we've seen leaders who come out and take stances and they fall every single time.
Okay. So I say it all the time, Black Americans gotta accept that they're American. That's off the jump. What do Americans like? Hustlers. Why do Americans like hustlers? Because Americans like money. Hustlers. Why does America like money? Because Americans like power. Boom. Is that our narrative? Get over it. Speaking on being an American thing, I love Joe Biden. Not Joe Biden. I actually do love
Joe Budden.
Joe Budden, but I do love Joe Biden too. Joe Biden is the new release. Consistency. It's like you consistently a fuck up, but it's okay. You consistently a fuck up. You always gotta apologize for some shit because your mouth be slipping. But
Man,
going back to protect the leaders, the problem that we have in America right now, getting outside of the ADOS and everything else, is that Americans are going by party and not principle. Party and not principle. And what I mean by that, I'm being paid when I say that, is because you have the Republicans in California and Texas right now who are basically committing felonies with these fake voter boxes and everything else, ballot boxes. Internationally, that means that our democracy is at risk. Our credibility is at risk.
Is it at risk or is it gone?
You watch when I'm gonna show you some clips of DW News, and it was like, America is sketchy. Europe is looking at America going like, yeah, America.
I don't think democracy ever existed.
Democracy exists, but democracy is me in the Tocqueville. What people have to understand is demos, the people, Kratos, power. Democracy is your household on steroids. When you have multiple people trying to make one decision and everyone has to live by certain decisions, it's always going to be, you know how you reach the compromise when everyone's upset but no one's willing to fight. That's a compromise. Everyone's upset because no one got what the hell they wanted, but no one's so upset that they want to fight someone else. That's how you deal with a compromise. Everyone's upset, but no one's willing to fight. That's how compromises happen, and that's what democracies are. But we don't have that principle. We don't have principles. We can't have principles in society where we make fun of side chicks and side niggas and everything else. Oh, the side bitch this. And you can't have a society where we want to have, I'm a man, follow my lead, but you don't listen to mature women. Here's my thing, and you know me. The market can't command something that the market doesn't have. We want leaders to come in on credit. We want someone to give us things on credit. And when I say we, I mean the masses. It's like taking me on my word. People aren't living by principle. And going back why I said I love Joe Budden, is because he had a pub interview with Russ. And Russ, I'm happy that Russ is going at the 13-year-old white boys on the blogs who make fun of hip hop, because I've been trying to get young black people to understand those white people who are making hip hop full of drunkies for rappers, and why you gotta wear certain things and do certain things to be popular. That's because it's a 13-year-old white boy that's doing that, not necessarily that rapper. And because we know there's a white executive that's pushing forward for certain narratives, now you putting in the image of a little black boy, a little brown boy, or a little white kid. This is what black people do. This is why principles are important instead of parties. In America, the citizen is above the party, but we aren't there. People are playing into party politics. And the more we play into party politics, you can't protect the principles, because what Tony and them doing is objective. They're going to the middle ground. That's why when I wrote in the book, it's like, some people won a 1968 Robert Kennedy. They won a 1968 King, where they're willing to go to the middle ground and say, well, damn, we went from the main man's march to the poor people's march, the poor people's campaign. They don't want the Malcolm that came back from Hodge and was like, okay, I saw white people who look like me, I saw white people who shared my faith. So it's not the white devil that's the problem. It's those who think about white capitalism in the way they do, as in being cannibals with other people's lives and labor. So going record is all up. The principle can only protect it if people stand on principles. If they don't stand on principles, then they're not going to protect the principle, because they fear other fans anyway. There's a lot, I'm saying it, it's a lot of black Americans who don't believe in anything. It's a lot of black Americans who don't believe in anything. It's a lot of black Americans who don't believe in anything, but will use the pain of black Americans to get to what they want.
That's all day, every day. All day. With that being said, if you're watching the video right now, like the video, please. We thank you. It's free, helping us grow. Share the video. It's also helping us grow. We want to get to a certain point where we're not just having conversations. Of course, we all do our own separate work, whether it be in government, in community, and sometimes overlapping. But I really just would like for people to, again, comment, engage. You don't have to necessarily agree, because I be wanting to smoke. But before we get into that, I just wanted to touch on one last topic, man. And the last topic is deconstructing identity politics and anchoring race in America. And what I'll say to that is, thank you. Because I wrote Death of a Nigga Boy, which in large tries to speak on that. And I'll say that they do a better job at that. Not to say that Death of a Nigga Boy, which you can buy politics and prose, isn't great in itself, because it's street, vernacular, shameless. Hey, because it is what it is. But I also respect the acumen and the expertise that comes with people who've been here probably, double my life. But I appreciate the fact that they anchor race in America. And I say that because a lot of people have conversations around race, and even when we talk about African Americans, they say, "Oh, let's talk about what we were before we came here as it pertains to being Black." And what a lot of the times I try to get people to understand is like, look, if you were to go back to the Mansa Musas, the Egyptian kings and queens that y'all so much want to be, if you mention the word Black to them, not only that, if you mention the word Black to them, they would not be able to conceptualize what it is you were talking about, because that terminology didn't exist. People don't like ADOS because ADOS anchors Black in America, because they don't necessarily like the fact that, again, it causes and creates a certain level of honesty that you have to come to the conversation with. Because a lot of people tell me, oh, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, is like, oh, you can't, African Americans try to police Blackness. And it's like, look, I am policing Blackness. Because in the end of the situation, when we talk about Blackness and whiteness, those things are manifestations and creations of America to justify slavery and a hierarchy in America. I understand that those things have permeated throughout the globe, but no other nation has, one, legalized the language, used it and codified into the legal apparatus as well as the economic apparatus. And what I mean by that is, I don't think people understand enough that a lot of the games, quote unquote, that they play stems from, again, that hierarchy. So it's like when you talk about institutional behavior, a lot of institutional behavior is predicated on a lot of ideology around, look, you have to subjugate a particular caste. People who migrate here now, which is why a lot of the times people think ADOS is anti-immigrant, which is not, is like, look, as an immigrant, I'm not trying to come at you. What I'm trying to do is help you to understand that you're being used in a way to uplift and uphold certain institutional behaviors that are toxic to us all, not just POC, but other white people as well.
But that's what ADOS leadership has to stop talking about ADOS. That's what I meant by what they're doing. It's like someone's calling in.
Go ahead.
Wait, no, let them come in. Like, ADOS leadership has to stop talking about ADOS and actually talk about interdisciplinary and be international. That's what I'm getting to. It's like, what do you all want to do? Because I agree with you. And believe me, Wole Soyinka of the African diaspora will agree with you. But a lot of Black Americans have to be willing to accept with the transatlantic slave trade. Not everyone knows what the transatlantic slave trade is about.
Yellow.
You muted.
You are muted, fam. And I'm going to ask you to start your video just so everybody can understand that we're not dealing with bots, because
Hello.
I like video.
Hello.
Hello. We can hear you. You.
Spanish, English.
English. Let me see. Oh, we got a lot today. All right, PP.
Se andió la tipa a todas sus amigas con un col. La bebecita de Berlín y bebe wiki. Fuma marihuana y también se mete piqui. Cena bella con la friquitona friki friki. Es media salvaje y es adicta a mi link. Le mete el wiki. Fuma marihuana y también se mete piqui.
Si todavía me amas como antes, ya nada me parece interesante.
But you can go ahead. Continue your stance.
What was I saying?
You were talking about what it is necessary in terms of how we can't necessarily continue, or not we, but how they should pivot from just talking about ADOS.
Yeah, because you would have to understand that the behavior, this is what I want everybody to understand. We're all talking about one group of people. That's why I keep saying Anglo-American capitalism. We're talking about white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. We're talking about Anglo-Saxons in Europe and England. We're not talking about all of Europe. The same way Africa is not a country, Europe is not a country. And a lot of people treat Europe like it's a country. It's like there's Eastern Europe too. Eastern Europe is also subjugated by Western Europe. We have to get into talking about the behaviors, because that's what I mean by capital does what capital do. When Yvette brought up Thomas Piketty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was glad she brought up Thomas Piketty as well. But that also means that they have to go into non-ADOS histories. When I always talk about America being a land of immigrants, it's also a land of diasporas, and talking to other diasporas. Having to talk about how labor exploitation happens in other diasporas, how things happen in other diasporas, so we get away from, well, ADOS is just talking about ADOS. It's like, well, no, ADOS means and understands that it happens to other people, but articulate how it's particular to ADOS so that they can get ahead of those stories. That's what I mean by this. Sometimes they can't. Just remove all those, bro. Don't trust none of them.
Don't trust none of them.
Don't trust none of them. Remove them all.
Yeah, I would agree, because also what I feel like you run into, because I do agree with the ADOS 100%. I love what they do, but what you have now is that some people have dual backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll speak for myself. I'm Jamaican and ADOS. You know what I'm saying? And for me, I love ADOS because it sort of defined that aspect of me that I didn't necessarily understand, because I was given the values of primarily my Jamaican mother.
So the Afro-Cuban perspective.
Yeah, so I understood those values more,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I didn't understand those ADOS values. Well, I didn't understand them as ADOS. I understood them as Black. It is a difference, because Black is so ambiguous. You can look at certain situations and take away different things based on hierarchy. So Black in middle class doesn't operate the same as Black in lower class or Black in upper class, versus the Jamaican experience is the Jamaican experience. You know what I'm saying? So ADOS helped me root those experiences based upon it being anchored in an actual justice claim. You know what I mean? It wasn't just these anecdotal experiences from, oh, I grew up in this type of, you know what I mean? Because a lot of times when people talk black, people talk class. And it's like, I don't understand black in class. I understand black from what I see. You know what I'm saying? And ADOS helped me understand that even though you have these things, they're all rooted in this, and the behaviors come directly from it being rooted in this. You know what I'm saying? It's not rooted in class. It's not rooted in some ambiguous things that people believe in. It's these set of behaviors come from this.
Yeah, that's talking about what we have to get into is talking about timelines and respecting timelines. Because at the same time we were under Jim Crow and the Black Codes, many Black immigrants were under a colonial power. That's why they don't know about our plight. You got a new one up.
My God.
They Zoom bomb.
Cause yeah, and just to expound on it, like
I like Phineas and Ferb, some petty mug.
They were.
But not just to expound on it a little more. So like when we talk in terms of like violence, so in my mom coming from Jamaica, I was never really seen to view the violence as like horrible.
The violence of what?
Within the community, the ADOS community.
Okay.
I wasn't taught to view it as horrible because in the time of my mom being in Jamaica, like no one had to move because of the violence in a ADOS community. In Jamaica, those regimes that took over like those presidents there, you would become refugees in some of those cases. Like you had to relocate. You couldn't live there anymore because of the violence. Like,
got you.
So whenever I would get scared of just being outside or interacting, it was countered with like, well, in Jamaica, you know what I mean? You ain't have to move because of, you know what I mean? You had that comparison of being able to hear stories about that type of violence and comparing it to the ADOS violence that you see, and it minimizes it in a sense. Because you don't really get that sense of like, it's a difference between third world violence and what you see in your community.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I don't think people get sort of that dynamic in a sense, but I got that because I primarily grew up with that.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And just some of the conditions, like
yo, you still muted, fine?
I wanted to let Daquan finish. My fault, y'all.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, so just like some of the conditions, like growing up in the projects in the city, like I didn't really care for some of the things. Like, okay, we have bugs. It was I won't want to say it was fine with me.
Because what you're talking about is a non-American perspective.
Yeah, it wasn't fine with me because I would get called on it. But like my mom didn't grow up with like shelter.
You're talking about the non-American perspective.
We didn't grow up with like, so the bug issue was mute. It was a moot point because we were just fortunate to, you know what I mean? In Jamaica, you're fortunate to just have running water. You know what I mean? You're not out in the...
Because their infrastructure ain't up to...
Exactly. So some of the values that I got passed along to weren't necessarily the same values. And I didn't necessarily understand the Black values because those Black values were so it was so, you know, ambiguous because it's based on class. Like the values of a middle class Black person ain't necessarily the values of a lower class, not necessarily Black values of an upper class. So it's like when you look at Black as a whole, you don't know what to really anchor yourself in based on like who, because you'll be taught from a middle class Black person to shun some of the things that you get taught just in your community. Or in the lower class Black community, you'll shun the people who make it out.
Nah, I got you.
Versus, you know, my Jamaican experience, everybody's the same for the most part.
All day, every day. And just to kind of, because I hear exactly what you're saying in terms of there's no cohesiveness amongst the quote unquote African American, ADOS, Black American community in terms of what is that standard. So when you enter the class spectrum of it as an outsider, you, depending on which class you enter into, that's what kind of anchors your movements or how you navigate.
Yeah.
But I wanted to allow CA, our guest, to, you know, come in, had a conversation. We appreciate you for calling in. And what is it that you wanted to add to the conversation around ADOS or just Black Americans, African Americans, you know, in general?
First, I want to say peace to you guys, Devon, Quenton, Daquan. Love what you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you, kind sir.
Shout out to y'all for real. You know, once again, I'm coming from an Ethiopian American perspective. I've been following the ADOS movement for about 2 years, roughly. Thanks to Devon putting up posts from Facebook. And my introduction was actually a video that Antonio Moore did, you know, talking about insecure and how it was taking a lot of jabs at African American men when it comes to dating, right? Which is not what they mainly focus on now, but that's what drew me towards Antonio Moore.
Mhm.
But as I watched more and more of his videos, then the talk about reparations started to unfold. So over the years, I've been watching their videos, and like Daquan was talking about how he's navigating with his Jamaican side and African American side. I'm Ethiopian on both sides, but I'm learning more about the African American experience on how they frame it. They make so many points about not only the data that they get to frame the African American experience, but just simply the cultural differences between African Americans and other Blacks, right? You know, with the data, they talk about the average wealth for a family, with using just their liquid assets. They talk about the overall wealth of whites and Blacks. They talk about how different groups like the Irish became white and how white women were instrumental in slavery just as much as white men were to a degree. So all these things are just giving me so much info on the African American experience on a deeper level, and it's easy to digest because, you know, I'm not a scholar myself, but they frame it in a way where it's easy for, you know, a non-scholar to kind of grasp it.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, they base things on data, and I think they do things with integrity. And I'm seeing how like a lot of leaders don't really, they might do things for ego or just for cash, right? What I see from Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell is they genuinely care about their people. So you know, that's my take on it. Let me know if I'm rambling too much, you guys. I don't want to take
No, you good. We can have a conversation because in terms of you making a statement that you're Ethiopian on both sides.
Right.
And the fact that you have been entered into this conversation through data as well as conversations around how Black men, and if I hear you correctly, because I also came into Antonio more on the side of ambitious, toxic ambition. Yeah, because that's something that resonated with me, and being from the quote unquote urban environment where you had to make it no matter what. And I had to, one of the things that helped me was I had to take a look back and reflect on myself because I was exhibiting certain toxic behaviors based on this, what he coins as toxic ambition. When you go out and you don't necessarily have, you know, consideration for people in terms of how you move, but you're so driven and you're so ambitious, you overlook all of the human capacities, you overlook all of the realities of the world to achieve this one goal you set out on. That's something that has resonated with me. And what I would like to hear from you is, in coming into it as a person who was Ethiopian on both sides, what is it that you like, and was there ever a moment where you wanted to pull back from it?
To clarify it from what? ADOS?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So, you know, I was drew to the movement. Well, I was just drew to that Antonio Moore after that one video because it's you know it was against men bashing, right? And it felt good to hear that. But as I follow him more, you know, he's an attorney from UCLA, if I'm not mistaken, and Yvette Carnell is a scholar rooted in you know, political in politics, right? So I think for me, my understanding of the African American experience I learned more when I was in college, right? And it was thanks to organizations and even African American history classes, right? And basically, I'm learning about not only slavery but different movements. You know, the civil rights movement and different leaders like A. Philip Randolph, and I'm learning so much more, you know, while in college, and I'm developing this, you know, just wanting to you know, have the right mindset and understand what the situation is with African Americans. And I think over time I developed like a Pan-African mindset, right? And what I learned is that all 50 plus African countries in the Caribbean, African Americans in the United States, they've all been screwed over by white governments, right? And it's like, it's easy to feel like, you know, you want those countries to prosper and bounce back from what they've been through. But the ADOS movement teaches me how everybody has to clean their own yard. And I remember one video being shared on Twitter with a conversation between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. And Nikki Giovanni said, everybody has to clean their own yard, where it's like, we root for each other as Black people. Not that we have to, but it's kind of like, you know, for me, it feels like I want to root for every Black nation that was wrong. So it kind of sucks that I feel like I have to go away from Pan-Africanism, but I respect that ADOS is taking that hard stance where it's like, you know.
Well, this is the thing. What I'll say to that is, I don't think ADOS moves away from Pan-Africanism. I think what a lot of people do in terms of their political ideology and their ideology overall is they try to navigate from a space of where they think it should be versus where it is. What I hear from ADOS and what I get from ADOS, as well as myself, is that I would love for it to be a hug 'em party, right?
Right.
I would love for it to be this cohesive diaspora that works in unison against, quote unquote, white supremacy. I would love that. But I think what happens is like they're not necessarily against Pan-Africanism. It's just an acknowledgement that, look, Pan-Africanism is a goal to be reached, because Pan-Africanism has to be first, if we're talking about the term, has to be achieved on the continent of Africa.
I'll say this.
Because a lot of people, give me 1 second, a lot of people, African Americans specifically, enter into Pan-Africanism based on African perspective.
There's no such thing as the African perspective.
But that's the thing. For American blacks,
I get that, but I don't give a fuck what they feel.
But that's the thing. I'm talking to him about.
I get you.
Where it's coming from, per se.
But here's the problem. It doesn't make sense. Go ahead. This is what I'm saying. Here's the problem. Once you understand that your African perspective was generated by men in Berlin in the 19th century, then you begin to understand that what we call the transatlantic slave trade, Ethiopia is Eastern Africa. Eastern Africa, they deal most with the Berber trade. When we get into the transatlantic slave trade with the Portuguese, they went away from Northern Africa. What we got to get into understanding is that part of the reason Pan-Africanism doesn't work is because it's a cultural apparatus and not a political apparatus and a legal apparatus. Because Africa in itself was not conquered just by the English. That's why I keep saying Anglo-American capitalism. We also have to think about the Dutch. When we talk about Afrikaners, we also have to think about the Belgians. When we think about the Congo. When we think about Africa as a whole, each one of us have to clean our own yard because we had different people dealing with us. So the difference between an Afro-Caribbean and a Black American, and what I love about ADOS is that ADOS says, no, we didn't have the same slave codes. The British weren't slave holders the same way Americans were slave holders. The British had overseers that supervised their plantations. With America, they literally lived next to us, and they had fears. So when I say no, when I say Pan-African, is like, the problem is that a lot of people in the African diaspora creates Africa as its Camelot.
I agree.
It's like Africa was never Camelot. It was never perfect. We always had divisions. We can be Pan-African culturally, meaning that I want to show up to your dinner for whatever rituals that you have. You show up to my dinner, whatever rituals we had. And when we go in the office, like, no, man, my man ain't suspicious for such and such and such and such. She's not suspicious for such and such and such and such. Being Pan-African means, for me, that we protect each other culturally in our different cultures and not let a Western European ideology dominate us. But when it comes down to cleaning up our own yards, that's because we had to deal with different people at different times and different forces. So the fact that we got to divide to conquer our problems doesn't bother me. And that's why I say no, because I feel like people keep drinking from the well of hope instead of acknowledging, to your point, what is now. Because I don't think ADOS is xenophobic, nor is it anti-Pan-Africanism. I just think that Pan-Africanism has to be roped into realism.
No, and that's my larger point, is that when we talk about African Americans see Africa as a whole. They see Africa as the United States. They are smoking crack.
They're smoking crack.
But
because not all Ethiopia agrees with Ethiopia.
I agree.
You're talking about millions of people.
But this is the thing. He's coming into it as an outsider.
I get you.
The same way Quan is coming into it as an outsider into what it is we experience.
Okay, so that means I gotta listen more now.
Yes.
Okay, I'm listening to Zimba. I'm not listening to your ass. you want me to cake for these niggas? I'm not doing.
I'm not caping for nobody. hold on. I'm not caping for nobody. What I'm trying to articulate is that, look, we as African Americans, as well as continental quote unquote Africans, have to come to an understanding that, look, part of me I don't necessarily believe that continental Africans act in good faith, because they understand that continental Africa is 54 countries and divided amongst that. But when they come here, they present a different narrative. Which feeds into the ignorance of African Americans and then allows people to take advantage of that. What I'm asking for is, look, if you're an ally, do not do that. If you are saying you're an ally, do not use that cachet and that mystique of being a continental African to appeal to African Americans. And African Americans stop believing that Africa is, in your words, Camelot.
It's not Camelot.
Because it's not. And I think it comes and boils down to what I always talk about is we need to have honest, brutal conversations. If we really want to be a diaspora, we gotta have brutal conversations with each other and be honest and be upfront.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, that's where our relationship stems from. It's being honest and upfront, and you allowing me to speak as an African American and not just a Black person. And that's where the cohesiveness comes. It's like, nah, let's talk what's real. I know that it's not cohesive over there, but I can't tell my other African American peers who don't study in academia and don't study and don't pay attention or don't have the anecdotal experience to speak to and understand what's happening on around them. So it's a lot of cons being played, which is why I always talk about or say, no, it's a lot of Black people in whiteface. Because it's a lot of Black people, quote unquote, who real white around here.
Mm.
Nobody want to talk about. But
listen.
go ahead,
Yeah,
my man.
Listen to
And Devon, I gotta agree with that. Where it's like ADOS is not against Pan-Africanism, and I think Quenton mentioned also they're not xenophobic. I agree with those points because they're not saying it's an issue with having love for everybody. It's just that we have to understand there's business to be done in America, and we can all come together. Let's all take care of our business and come together if that's a possibility. But even pointing out in Africa, right now in Ethiopia, there is a major issue between ethnic groups. With my family's ethnic group, it's threats of civil war between them and the government. Like, see, a person that this idea of Africa being Camelot is far from the truth, as we all know. Where and across the continent, it's ethnic groups more so than country unity. You know, so I think that covers that. Where it's like, though I have this feeling of being pro-Black, when we boil down to the truth, ADOS really breaks down what the situation is for Black Americans and for people that are descendants of immigrants like myself, and trying to understand the African American experience. No matter how much you're around them, you don't live the life like you guys. I never lived y'all life or know what it's really like. It's like ADOS frames it in such a way that's genuine and does it with integrity versus trying to do it for the wrong reasons, you know.
That's fair. So what I'm gonna do right now is we're gonna bring in a question. You here with us right now. We haven't had anybody else chime in into the waiting room. So Quan, can you give us the question and we'll all sit with it and move on that?
Okay, so Zimba, I understand you to be both, Ethiopian on both sides. So I'm gonna ask you a question. Have you ever had the "you're not like them" discussion with your significant others?
Yeah, and that's those are the tough questions, right? You know what? I got to start off with, first of all, between Ethiopians and African Americans, everything wasn't always culture and everything wasn't peaches and cream, right? Honest truth, right? It sucks because I'm trying to
say it, bro.
Just say, well, yes, it's judgment when a person fits into the African American stereotype that's portrayed. Whether it be through gangster rap, through anything, through not being successful in America. So yes, I've had somebody's told me that before, Daquan, where it's like, you're not like them, or even in a public setting where I might be more polite. I don't know, more polite or more like,
less aggressive.
Not fitting. Yeah, less aggressive. There people have said that to me. Yes.
Yeah, because what I'm getting at is the fact that I feel like that is the entry point for a lot of people who have that experience of having an immigrant background. And that's like the deciding factor. Because when I look back at life, you know what I mean? What you find is that if you play into those two things, those dualities, you can sort of speak your way into certain opportunities.
So what I want to say to that is, I don't want to interrupt you real quick because I want to give, he spoke his piece. I want to give both of y'all in the room because as Quenton knows, I refer to myself as the nigga because I am that urban kid who most people would shun just based on the simple fact that, nah, you a nigga, and we know you a nigga. And you jokingly always say that you wear that shit with a badge, yeah, because I'm a nigga and I know I'm a nigga, and I made earlier in my life to understand that. But you were alluding to something, and I want both of you all to speak because you asked him the question. He's Ethiopian on both sides, but you said you're ADOS on one side. But Quenton mentioned something very important. And the reason that, full transparency, that I love this man is because we're both from the same family. You said you've had that conversation before. I know you've had that conversation before. And I want you as an African-American to elaborate on that conversation. Because why? It's a lot of affluent people who do a lot of faking in terms of African-Americans who undergird the whole narrative that our fellow quote-unquote continental Africans can stand on. So please take your moment, and then I would love to hear how Quan and you move into in terms of that, because I heard you going into how you also had that conversation. Yeah. So please go around the room.
So
let the nigga hit.
Thank you, Zimmer, for bringing it up, because my experience is very weird. It's very weird because I have continental Africans as friends. I have Afro-Caribbeans as friends. I have South Asians as friends, Far Asians. And what you get down to is that Americans are ignorant of anybody other than America. And I found a lot of people who are non-American play on that. It's like, it's easy to make fun of Americans because Americans don't know anything outside of America. But I had, and this is the truth, we better get into it. Better get into it. I'm going to pause it. There's a reason why I don't date women who are biracial, as in white and black. I don't necessarily deal with like a certain color of woman either, or a certain type of woman who's aspirational. Because you can hear from my tone, I can put on my voice like, I went to private school. I can play that thing, but what happens is that you get some women who go like, you're black, but you're not like them. You're not. You can do it. I literally had a woman tell me, you are black in the bed and white in the street. Literally. I've literally had people treat me like
you nod your head over here.
Yes,
you heard that too?
Literally, son. Literally. From black women. I've had black women who tell me.
Say it again. You what in the bed?
You are black in the bed
and white
in the street. I literally, son, it's like, son, this shit is not a joke.
Man, and I gotta get the sound.
And when you say
sound effects,
exactly,
bombs for this bitch.
I literally had that, and so they would try to get you to play into a certain role so that they can, because there's a huge cachet in being the black dude that can articulate himself. When I say this, sometimes I get the red carpet rolled out, and I gotta roll it back up. It's like that tokenism. Some people feel the tokenism because it's a very lucrative life. And I'm telling you right now, bro, I've had more women get upset with me because I don't want to play into tokenism than not. So I don't, but you know me, you know my background. When I say un femme, I done dealt with so many different types of women from so many different backgrounds. A woman is a woman. Or when I say that is that people will pass you. And people will tell you, don't act like them because it's more marketable not to act like a nigga than to embrace that. I come from the same background. You knew we played on the street when there was no curb. But the problem is that there's a lot of black American women who don't want to deal with me because they don't think I come from that background. Because I drink the way I drink, I talk the way I talk, and I move the way I move. So I told you, I'm in the uncanny valley. I get those conversations. You're not like him. I've been called white boy a lot.
Caribbean man, go.
Yeah, and like I said, it has its own marketplace. Like, if you play in between the two, you get so much more access in terms of just opportunities. Because unfortunately, when you separate yourself, and this is some of the reason why I absolutely, to some extent, hate matriculating up. Because
thank you for saying that.
I hate matriculating up because what happens is what people discover certain things, and it's like they want you to play yourself against your people. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, nah, like those are my people, and I'm not turning my back on what I've lived all of my life and the people I love, just to play this role of, oh, I'm African American and Jamaican, and like, I'm not doing that. I'm rocking with who I grown to love, and wherever that leads me, it leads me. But I'm not going to choose one background over the other because of the fact that one could give me more access by playing sort of these, puppeteer games with myself versus me just being with the people I love and letting, I know some people are letting God handle the rest. You know what I'm saying? So I just feel like a lot of people aren't privileged enough to have that stance because they are already in it and they've made so many decisions that now they have to sort of be that. But that's literally, when you look at people that have both, that is the entry point. That's when you learn you're different. When you have that conversation, it's like when you have the sex conversation. Nothing's the same after that. When you, as a person who is something else in ADOS, when you had that conversation of you're not like them, that's literally when life begins. And like that decision of where you go from there is pretty much setting the rest of your path.
You know what's interesting about this whole conversation, right? So I started off saying I'm the nigga, right? I think it's interesting that we all having this conversation because even as the nigga, there's opportunity. And what I mean by that is I've been in conversations with individuals who would go the length to say we'll make you an honorary, or we will absolve you of your quote unquote ADOSness because you are able to articulate, you are able to move and navigate in a way that we've never seen someone come from your background come from. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, I've had that, I don't do it anymore, debate when people are like, no, I actually went to this school, that school, and grew up in this zip code and grew up there. And it's like, oh no, how can you? You do that? And it's like, well, no, we'll make an exception for you. And I would say to anybody who's watching, first, like the video, share the video, and comment.
That man CK coming for the highlight reel. He's the highlight reel.
All day, every day. But what I will also say to that is, love us for who we are. Understand that there is more ADOS, African American men like me. Understand that though I've made it, quote unquote, because I haven't made it to anywhere outside of just surviving America, there are men who have achieved more than me. There are men who have put in a lot of work. And to anybody who's watching, respect those men, even if they aren't as articulate as me. I learned rhetoric as a byproduct of my mother working in DOJ and that just coming along with the territory.
Professional background.
There are so many people who are great, African Americans who are great, who are good, who understand it, who are allies to you all. They just don't necessarily have the status quo of what you would deem as being successful or having what it takes to be what it is or accepted into the group. So I always push people when they say that to me, it's like, look, if you want to give me the exception, I got 5, 10, 20 motherfuckers who you need to get the exception to as well. Because guess what? I'm not so naive to believe that I was the greatest of my class. It's a lot of people who believed in the system. It's a lot of people who believed in education. It's a lot of people who believed in what it is we were fed as African Americans, young kids growing up in the 1990s. And when you talk about DC, the murder capital, post-crack cocaine era. It's a lot of kids who made it, great kids that fell through the cracks. So I always push it on people. And if you want to lift me up, I need you to at least lift up 10 of my people behind me. Point blank period. And I'm just talking off the strength of I'm bringing them in. I say who they are, and we there. We can have the conversations around credentials and all that after, but if you want to make an exception for me, what that exception come with? Because I need my people hungry, my people hurt. There's people who out here that do work that ain't eating. And that's trash. I need all of my people to eat because I'm not the greatest of my people. And that's all I would say to anybody who is watching, who is outside of the quote unquote African American experience. And even if you are affluent, Black, African American, ADOS, stop playing, man. I know y'all don't want to pass the torch. I know y'all want us to fight for it, but you got to pass the torch. Or what you want to do? Die like John Lewis and then leave what? An empty legacy? Because your daughter drive Uber? You didn't even put your family in place.
It's not everybody, and I gotta say this.
What?
I thought it was the last comments.
I'm sorry.
I don't know.
See, they call white people racist. I be confusing the two.
It is. It's fine, but no, we have to get to the point where not
Baltimore. I don't name my state.
Not everybody has the acumen to do everything, and that's where the family values come in. But I want to ask a question to CA though.
Sure.
Yeah, you still here, good sir?
Say it again, brother.
I was just saying if you were still here.
I'm still with y'all, man. I'm still with y'all. What is coming? I'm loving the combo.
I have a question. How do you experience when Black Americans what are some of the fantasies about the world do you think Black Americans have about being non-Black American? To phrase that differently, where have you ever heard or experienced Black Americans wishing they were someone else and thinking that would be better?
If y'all don't mind, I kind of want to jump back into before I answer your question, Quentin.
Yeah, go ahead,
I kind of want to
go
jump back into what y'all was talking earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Talking where Devon was talking about how, he gets that exception, from non-ADOS people when they find out, he doesn't fit the stereotype that they think about. And once again, coming from the Ethiopian American perspective, I hear, the opinions of some Ethiopians, right? From a Uber driver to a barber, and how they're unfairly judgmental the African American experience. And it sucks to share, but it's the truth. And I gotta be honest, where they are judgmental about it, and they don't even take into account the history or how would it be if they were, went through that experience. It's so quick to be like, man, they're in a bad state. Why do they act like this, right? But at the same time, it's like me being around African Americans, it's like, okay, I understand their strife and what they go through. So I just wanted to point out how, like, I see how I hear how Ethiopians are judgmental. Not all, but some I've come across, family members even. And I'm just like, it sucks how I see that. And maybe sometimes they have unfavorable interactions, but that doesn't make an excuse for judging and trying to, having a certain opinion, So I just wanted to kind of chime in on what y'all was talking about earlier. But to answer your question, Quentin, I think that there's that idea of Africa being Camelot and thinking, things are so nice in Africa, or, they might even not be so happy with the state of African Americans and wishing that, things were better for them, or saying, I wish our people did this or did that, but not knowing that, everybody's situation is different. And I can't think of a specific situation, but I can kind of remember, people kind of making vague statements about how, like, they wish that people were together, and how, like, kind of referring to Africa as like this Camelot-like place.
Yeah, and the reason, I just wanted to follow up there, but the reason I asked that question, because I love transparency, it wasn't to put you on jump for the street. I was just curious, because I hear a lot of people saying, I wish, and this is for me, in my experience, is like, I wish I wasn't black, I wish I wasn't this, and you can see it a lot, and you can see it a lot of people who are defeated because they are in the economic position that they think they should be in. And it's like, one of the things that gives me my greatest source of pride, and I say it all the time, is like, our ancestors were chattel slaves, and we were treated horribly, but we still survived, we still made it, and we have changed the world, how the world thinks about surviving, how the world thinks about being resilient. When you talk about resilience, some of the first songs that come up are black, and they're Black American. But I ask that because I want a lot of Black Americans to understand is that as a Black American, you get a lot of power when you walk into a room. You got the power when you as a Black American can speak your shit and sit down there and don't move, because everyone else wants to have that kind of space inside of the room. And not everybody is used to carrying power, and that's what we call swag. But not everybody is used to being or having to be comfortable enough within themselves to be within a room to make money. So some people don't grow up until they get a job. Some people literally have to grow up on the job. Whereas and we know, you got to grow up before you even get to a job. You got to be damn near full grown. And so what I want for a lot of young, because I keep saying it, is that we got to preach value into the kids. Because what happens is that a lot of these people, we lose them at 9, 10, 7. We lose them because they don't think that they are valuable enough, and so they begin to live vicariously. And what I love about, I had a literally, and I'm gonna end on this one. This was a while ago. I was at a party up on 14th Street. It was a Serbian dude, right? This is the first time I had Rakia. I love that shit. I had Rakia, and he was telling me about, he was from Serbia, telling me how bad it was that Americans keep moving out their family house to go rent and get another house, where in Serbia, they just live their generation after generation so that the money can go to the family instead of keep paying for property. You tell that to most Black Americans, it's like, oh, no, my child will get out of my house at 18, they failed and everything else. It's like, we talking generational wealth, we got to talk about intergenerational households. And because so many people think, well, if my parents, I live in my house, I live in my parents' house, I have failed. It's like, you don't understand how some of the groups you want to aspire to be have made it where they are. And I think that's where I always ask people who are non-ADOS, it's like, how do you feel about when ADOS lives vicariously through your group? Because Rastafarianism lives through Ethiopia, and Haile Selassie alive is like, that shit got scary.
Yeah, and I think, because we've had that conversation, I think it's problematic and toxic that we do that, because we try to formulate a lot of our movements and how we navigate around other people. And even CA, we've had that conversation on our platform in terms of why. And even him as an Ethiopian stating that stop trying to do that. You have to, as African Americans, formulate your own plan. And I've heard that throughout. To be quite frank and quite honest and being fully transparent, like I've had some, again, bad experiences with continental Africans, but I've had super, super, super good experiences on the other side of that, which is why I don't get out and disparage any other side, as I know those things can happen and they are a manifestation of the whole group. And the only thing that I always ask for people as, African Americans is that you don't disparage us as a whole group. Like, I get that some of us are poo-poo. That's fair, that's fact. But let's have a conversation around, one, the people who aren't poo-poo, but then also, why are people poo-poo? Why are people bad? Why are people doing what it is they're doing? Going back to your point. And I think that's fair. I think that's understanding. What I would say to you is, do you have any last words for the Gilded Sage community before we depart?
Once again, Quentin, Devon, Daquan, man, you guys are doing a great job. It's always great to tune in. I love this topic about ADOS. I just want to reiterate how I love what they're about. I think they do things with integrity. They're rooted in data. And they taught me so much, and they continue to teach and push for reparations. Of course, I understand that no movement is perfect, no person is perfect. So I know there's some areas where people might not agree with how they operate, but for me, it's been a great vehicle to learn about the African American struggle. And you guys are doing a great job again, and definitely great to be a part of the live today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, kind sir. We appreciate
Thank you.
Again, much love from a personal level. I appreciate your support. I appreciate your willingness to speak these out loud. As you know, I'm always a person who we can have conversations behind closed doors, but the out loud and in person matters that much more. So I thank you. And please, as you always know, understand that it doesn't go unnoticed. And I appreciate it. And I got you.
Appreciate
What
y'all.
it is all love. And with that being said, we appreciate you, Gilded Sages, Quantum Poet, Inquisitive Q, for supporting from Jump Street, being here, willing to have a conversation. And when we have our conversation next week, we definitely hope to see you again. But we bid you farewell tonight, kind sir, and much love.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, fellas.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. And so, we got another one. Okay.
Is it?
We just going to keep going. I feel like this my man. Boy, you better have your camera up. If it's who I think it is, you better have your camera up, boy. Hold on. See, I'm tripping now. Start the video. Because I need to see who I'm talking to. Oh, nah. You want some...
Picadura de la cobra gay. Si te pica te vuelves gay. Picadura de la cobra gay.
Mute and blue. Remove. So what you with somebody else?
Nope.
But yes. Thank everybody for tuning in. Thank everybody for watching. Thank everybody for calling in. Even you people who tried to Zoom bomb us. I like Phineas and Ferb. Shout out to Phineas and Ferb. That was some junk I watched back in the day. I don't know who this new duck junk was. You aren't necessarily cool. But the Phineas and Ferb bomb was pretty cool. With that being said, like the video, share the video. We appreciate y'all comments. We appreciate the dialogue. We appreciate my guy CA, If y'all go on Zoom bombers, be more creative. Thank you. And please, that's all I ask. If you're gonna be disrespectful, be creative in your disrespect. Thank you. And please. Q, do you have any final words? What's this pen over here? Just tell the people. Matter of fact, before you get into the pen, follow us at Gilded Sages on IG. We have some white papers that are going to be coming soon, leading up to 2021, talking about what matters for Black Americans, ADOS, African Americans, despite the results of the election. And I can't wait. As a person who is a part of the collective, I can't wait. This guy right here, academia, has some fire for you all. Fire for me too. I'm waiting to see, you know. But we need y'all to stay tuned for that. Follow us. Keep aloof.
I'm good, man. Y'all have a great evening. I ain't got nothing else because the white papers are coming out. The first one is going to introduce what ideas mean. The second one is going to introduce social capital and what social capital has done and has not been allowed to do in Black America. And the third one, we're going to focus on Black women inside of the workforce, since we have this whole thing about protect Black women. And are we going to set Black women for white feminism? Let's see where we're going there. But I'm going to get into that. But yeah, I'm in that.
Boy, you not. I thought you told me don't be speaking on that.
Oh, no, I want, because, bro.
You speaking on that.
Some things got to be written.
No, I got you.
Some things got to be written. Because these people going to think that these pages going to be small. It's like, son, this white paper is 10 pages and I got to reduce it down. I got to make it to a rule. No, I got to make it to a rule because people think I'm a joke and I'm going to have to come back and hit them again. It's like, I'm going to play with you. You think it's a game? I want to treat it like one.
Y'all heard it. Straight from Inquisitive Q. White papers coming. We trying to solve issues. We trying to be out here. Again, like the video, share the video. Again, shout out to the Creative School too. If y'all want to, they got some mentor opportunities opening up. That's Southeast DC Stanton Elementary School. Shout out, big love to them. They doing good work. So thank y'all all coming out to our live. We love you. We appreciate y'all. Like the video, share the video. And again, when either one of my people, Inquisitive Q, Quentin Hoy, Quan Ford, I don't know what your Facebook name is, maybe your right name, Daquan Johnson. Say something, comment, man. Leave a comment, have a discussion, have a dialogue. And we got our Gilded Sages page. We working, we building it as we flying it. We working, so we'll have a page to consolidate all that eventually. But we thank y'all for supporting. We thank y'all for coming out. And good evening. Have some good eats, have some libations, and enjoy. We thank you